So welcome everyone to what's going to be a very interesting webinar. I'm Alex. If you don't know me, I'm one of the creators of this thing called Ubindi, and I also work at Yoga Trail. This is part of a series of webinars where various experts are bringing tips and advice for teachers, particularly in these, well, very interesting times. So before we get going, I'm just going to take one moment to tell you about Ubindi. It's simple software for independent teachers to handle admin, and it's just the best thing since sliced bread. Whether you're teaching in person or online or both, Ubindi handles registrations, payments, passes, memberships, waivers, attendance, and emailing. So sounds like a lot, but it's still really intuitive and easy to use and could save you a lot of time so you can focus more on your teaching. And that's that. Now, without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce today's speaker, Lizzie Reumont, and she's in the UK. Lizzie is an accomplished yoga teacher with advanced Jivamukti certifications. She's also a Rolfer and a Rolf movement practitioner. But more recently, she's gotten into mentoring other movement teachers and small to medium-sized businesses in the wellness space. So let's all welcome Lizzie. If you want to unmute yourself and make noise, I'll hand it over to Lizzie.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see some familiar faces today and some new faces that have been bold enough to unmute. Before we get into the crux of this uncertain time we're living in, I thought it might make sense and a good idea to just take a moment to come together collectively for a little grounding. So if you wouldn't mind, if you feel comfortable, I would invite you to find a nice seat, one that is maybe different from like your active listening to me mode, and perhaps a little bit more with yourself. So for that, you know, any seat in a chair or even in on the ground is fine, but take a moment to, if you feel comfortable enough and safe enough, to close your eyes. And as you do, notice where you are right now. So what are you bringing to this space today? And you might take a moment to notice if there's any place that you are holding in the body. And instead of working around that place, I would invite you to bring some tender awareness to that place. To coax your breathing into that place. And to allow yourself to find your back. The back is a place of support that you can rest into. You might want to take just a couple more breaths there to notice the quality of the tongue, of the jaw, of the eyes. And in your own time, when you're ready, you can allow the eyes to lift, and we'll meet each other perhaps in a ever so slightly more grounded place than when we first logged in. I'm just going to ask Alex and Alex if it's possible for you to watch out for new people coming in. Otherwise, I'm going to be multitasking, and I like to think of myself as a good multitasker, but I have been told very often otherwise.
Well,
So
we're on it. We're on it.
that would be great. So here we are together. Again, my name is Lizzie, and it's very, very wonderful and lovely to see your faces here today. Thank you for joining me on this talk, and also another thanks to you, Bindi, for offering these free webinars. I know from Alex, from having a few conversations with him, that they are coming from really a very good place in a world where there are a lot of different platforms available. I know that Ubindi is coming from this offering of a platform for independent teachers from a place of real goodwill. So I appreciate that. And I know that a lot of people are going to benefit from these webinars as well. And so, as per the title of this talk, we are living in a time of really great uncertainty. It's not just any old kind of uncertainty, it's collective uncertainty. And that is that everyone at this moment in time is living with a common level of not knowing. Now, under normal times, of course, there's the not knowing of the weather, especially if you live in the UK. More recently, though, there's the not knowing of potential terrorism, terrorist attacks. But, before this time of we will call COVID, there were assumptions about the day to day for most of us that meant that we could operate collectively within a framework that things would probably tick on as planned. You have a yoga class to go teach, the probability of you getting there and teaching that class pretty high. People could assume they'd make it to work, and also that their jobs would be secure. And if they weren't secure, they would have some kind of playbook that meant there would be time to adapt. Most people, not me. I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I came to teach this particular seminar. And that is that for the majority of my life, for 45 years, I've been living with an autoimmune disease. And for the most part, before you start to have any too much sympathy for me, my life was pretty normal. I operated with, with normalcy. Lots of people have these autoimmune diseases, and it still means that we can go to work and live our life. And that is until I became pregnant at 37. My life started to change. My autoimmune disease did not like that change in my body. And that resulted a couple years later, 3 years later, when I went into liver failure when I was 40. So at that time, my new normal meant that every month or so I was going into A&E, and I wasn't like the person in the room that you wanted to sit next to. I was the one in A&E, if you've ever been, curled up in a ball on the floor, like screaming that I'm going to die. So it was not really the normal situation. I was keeled over on the floor, and I would be admitted to the hospital every time for about 10 days where I would have IV antibiotics. And those IV antibiotics meant that then after the 10 days, I could go out and resume teaching yoga and practicing yoga and being a mother. So during that time, also incidentally, I was going through my Rolfing training. And so it was quite an unusual time it felt like I was a little bit Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And then, after a few months of that, I was told I would need a transplant. And I spent the next 8 months in a really big not knowing phase while I was waiting for my donor. And so, during this time was not normal. And several times I actually went to the hospital and it didn't work out with the liver. So anyway, all this to say that uncertainty became my new normal. Now, what the doctors don't tell you is that uncertainty never goes away. It's always there. So there's so many things that can happen at any time. I mean, obviously, for someone who's had a transplant, it's a gift that my body now doesn't reject that organ. But at any time, things can change. I think that most of us don't realize how fragile the chemistry of the body really is. So Anyway, what I can tell you is that that time after the transplant, even though I was in the hospital 59 days after the transplant, the most intense challenge really probably came when I actually was free to walk out the door of the hospital. So, because at that time I was carrying around old expectations of myself to operate in a way that I had under how I used to do, how I used to operate professionally. So I was continually disappointed. I know from my best friends who told me I turned into, not a very nice person afterward, even though I was very grateful. The challenges to operate in a new circumstances were huge. What happened is I became disappointed in myself and the circumstance of life. I felt like a failure because I was using my old mode of being. I felt in many ways irrelevant or washed up as a yoga teacher because my body didn't look the way a lot of people expect a yoga body to be. So, in even a subtle way, even though I practiced yoga, I read a lot of yoga philosophy, I was very close with my teachers, I allowed myself, even in a very subtle way at that time, to be a victim of circumstance. So, I pushed myself to teach in unreasonable conditions. And that wasn't honoring what I was going through. And I tried really very hard to keep it together instead of looking for opportunities to offer something that I could manage, something that was being true to myself. So, all this to say that being a victim, even in a small and subconscious way, is never going to be a winning position. And by winning, I really mean winning for yourself. So many times through that period that I was in, I heard from many different peoples, we never really know what's going to happen. People get hit by buses without knowing that's going to happen. Natural events take place that sometimes wipe out whole villages. And, there's terrorism, which I mentioned. There are huge infrastructure malfunctions. And of course, there is the coronavirus. So uncertainty is with us all the time. It's part of being human, and it's certainly part of having a temporal body. So today, for example, watching the US election, people are making all kinds of predictions about who's going to win, but nobody really knows what the outcome is going to be. So now here we are as movement teachers, and we're facing a lot of uncertainty about our work. What can we do with this uncertainty? How can we make something positive? So the good news is there's always options. We all always have a choice to make. Now, one approach would be to keep doing what you're doing. So if you were teaching classes before, you could try to keep teaching those classes, albeit in an online way. So if you're here today, though, the chances are that there's probably been an element of uncertainty or fear wrapped up in what you're currently offering. And where there's fear, there is also the potential for obstacles to come, mainly in the terms of negativity, insecurity, unrealistic expectations, and all of these things are wrapped into fear. So those things can present us with really big challenges from offering something that is heartfelt from a space where we can truly offer yoga. I mean, Pilates also, the teacher needs to be open, yes? So, it's you're on the back foot when you go about business like that. So on the other side of this is also, if you keep doing what you're doing under a new set of rules, your expectations continue to be unreasonable. So you have a negative cycle where you're trying to offer something and your expectations of whether or not you're delivering can become unsustainable and lead to negativity. So I wanted to call this something. So I would say that there's two models here. The first that I've just explained is we could call it the crash model. You're going to crash and burn if you keep trying to offer something with the number of people that maybe used to come to your classes teaching in the same way, but you've come online, all of these things. So chances are, if you're being reactive to a situation without sitting with it and, answering questions honestly about what you're offering, you might be in this crash state, which stands for, okay, wait for it, the contraction of your body. When you flex in, I don't know if you've ever felt yourself maybe before a class that you feel tightness. And then there's the R is reactive. I mentioned, reacting quickly to a situation instead of allowing yourself the time to sit back, to sit with it, observe. I'll get into those things in a moment. Then the A of crash is the analyzing. I think sometimes it's called analysis paralysis. That you're judging, endlessly what other people are doing. You're analyzing yourself, maybe critiquing your every move, and all of questions of self-worth come into this as well. Then there is the S, which is being very self fixated instead of looking out. And then there's the H, which is hurting yourself most of the time. Hating, which could be hating what you're offering or the other people that may be succeeding around you. Or hibernating, which is really hiding. A lot of the times, the new hibernating, I think, unfortunately, translates into the hibernating and hiding behind social media, which is not necessarily congruent with how or who you are, but what you're projecting out into the world. When there's incongruency, it's not a good recipe. There's conflicting things that may be pulling you and creating another little cyclone of fear. So let's just pause for a moment. Is everybody okay with what I've said so far? Yes, you could react with the little face thing. I know it's a bit funny underneath. I just learned this feature. I can send you all love, for example. So feel free to, if something resonates, maybe it won't resonate. I don't know. Is there something negative there? Well, anyway, you could put the face, with the open mouth. Then I know there might be a problem. So anyway, I wanted to focus a little bit on the fear because I don't want to undercut that or think in any way that you are being judged or weak for having fear. I mean, these fears are really very tangible and very real for all of us right now. Some of those fears that I have felt and that have been shared with me from other people is the fear of the loss of income, for example. If you're reliant on your profession as a teacher for income, this is, this is really real stuff. There's also other fears attached to that, though, which I don't want to underplay either, which is the fear of being good enough. I was talking to a very, very renowned photographer who's a dear friend of mine the other day, who hasn't had a photo shoot in, 8 months, and he's really the best. And he was saying, I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel like I'm not going to succeed in this field. And I thought, wow, well, that resonates. And it resonates for lots of people that are very gifted at what they do, but because they haven't been able to do it, there's a natural questioning of whether or not, this is going to be your way of sustaining yourself. So, and that is to say that there's about a gazillion teachers out there of every kind, of every shape, of every color, of every creed. And so there's this sense perhaps that the competition is different than it used to be. Suddenly, it's not just the 5 people in your village or the 1,000 teachers in your big city, but the worldwide global scale. So how do you compete? Now, I personally have my own view about competition. It may not be the normal view, but I'm going to share it with you anyway and let it sit with you. I personally feel that competition, the sense of competition, is a construct of an insecure mind. And the reason I feel that way is because each one of you, beautiful faces that I can see there, and even the pictures are also very lovely of the people that have chosen to keep their camera off. All of us have something unique to offer. It's just like this. And that should never be underplayed. That's the very special thing that you have to offer the world. The question is, if you don't believe it yourself, and if you don't know what that is, then nobody else will believe that or know that either. So, you know, there's a question, why would someone come to your class? And hopefully by the end of this talk, you will have an answer, I hope, to that question. Yeah. So I wanted to take a minute because I mentioned to you the crash model, which is the thing, hopefully, that after this talk, you will catch yourself if you're operating under that model, hopefully before you actually crash. Yes, so that's one thing. The second option, though, if you don't go in that direction, is to pause, as I mentioned, take couple deep breaths like we did at the beginning of this talk. It wasn't very long, but I know for myself, I can get nervous sometimes when I talk to people that I don't know or that I can't see or not on the screen. And so for me, that made a big difference. To take those couple of breaths there meant that I was more present, that I could be with you more instead of with my fear. Yeah, so that's one thing. So the other part of that is that really operating as a yoga teacher or Pilates teacher or any kind of movement teacher is that when we are in the right mindset, we actually have the mindset of a coach. And so the next model is going to be the coach model. That's the opposite of crash. Okay. So we're all coaches of sorts. And the coach model stands for, wait for it. Okay. There's the C, which means centered within yourself, being grounded and present. It might be just those couple of breaths that you need. It might be taking a walk outside if you have that space. It might even be taking your mind out of your fear place and looking at a beautiful piece of artwork, or if you play an instrument, making a few sounds, to bring you out of that contracted place. Then the O would stand for open to the changing circumstances and adaptable to not your own necessarily, yes, but also your students' needs. Yeah, so being open to being adaptable. The A stands for awareness. It's aware of the people around you and their needs. That's going to help a lot when you're starting to create something that is unique in your online offering, or if you have a chance to teach still in person, lucky you. And then the C would be connected mainly first and foremost to yourself. So, maybe you know someone who is very much connected to themselves. And probably if you're like me, that translates directly to how connected you feel with that person. There's usually an ability of people connected to themselves to also then be more available to connect with other people. And then the last one is H, coach, and that is to hold in the mind what's actually happening within your community, not from a place of judgment or projection, but from a place of curiosity. So to get out of the crash state, one of the ways to begin to crawl out of that place, having this other model in place, is what actually does it mean then to be centered and true to yourself? And this phrase, being true to yourself, I'd like to take just a couple of minutes there to unpack that. So if you have a pen, you might write this down. So what does it mean to be true to yourself? I'm going to give you one example. That's my example, but I am not you. So, being able, and you might revisit this over the next period of time. For me, being true to myself means not having to pretend or to be fake or to know it all. Yeah? For you, it might be something else. It's important to know. So there's the being true to yourself. If I haven't given you enough time, you can use that weird surprised emoticon with the face, the mouth open, but it looks like everyone is with me. Yeah. So, you know, there's the being true to yourself, and you might say, well, that's fine and good. So what if I'm true to myself? It's not going to, you know, buy the food I need to eat or pay the rent, so to speak. So there's all the things that get in the way of being true to yourself. And so if you like, it might be helpful for you to know what the fear is. So you could write down, if I'm not being true to myself, it feels like, what's the feeling? For me, I get anxious or nervous. It might be something different for you. And then there's one last piece of this for now, which is, if I was true to myself, what might happen? So the example here might be that for me, I might lose a few friends if I'm, you know, not faking it or like this. But also I might lose a few students. On the other hand, maybe if I was true to myself, other people would give themselves permission to also be true to themselves. Yeah. So there's always these two sides. See if you can find maybe one positive and one negative thing for now. So something for homework you might take away with yourself is the question of, how will you win if you're true to yourself? What would that feel like for you? And I'm aware that these questions, you know, if you really allow yourself to take it earnestly, then it can sometimes be challenging to look at that. But knowing the challenge, knowing where you are in your journey of being more true to yourself, is always better to know than not to know. Otherwise, you're just playing the cycle, the game again. So the next step is then to use this with some very basic marketing. I'm not going to call it jargon because I'm going to try and stay away from the jargon today. But knowing that you're being true to yourself means that you can start to unpick what it is that you offer. I mentioned that there are lots of teachers out there, lots of yoga teachers, and that's that way for the positive. You know, it's positive that maybe someone just like you could find you. Yeah. I mean, I personally never thought I would hear from people who had a liver transplant who wanted to practice yoga. But as a matter of fact, I have a couple of private clients who've been through a transplant who want to know how to use yoga to get back, or not get back, but to reinvent their relationship with their body, you know, so it's possible. And so this reason of being true to yourself is actually the major reason that people will come to your yoga classes. Being true to yourself means knowing what you offer. And within that, you can start to then better understand who is your audience. It's not always going to be people just like you, hopefully not, because that's the beauty of being diverse, that you never know who might resonate with your true voice. Yeah? But give yourself a chance to swim in the ocean of your true voice. Yes, that's very, very important. And being clear with who you're talking to, who your audience is, knowing where you are centered within yourself, quite frankly, means that whatever you offer is clear. And that means that people will better be able to make a choice if they want to come to your class, or also important, if they don't want to come to your class. It's helpful for both of you to know this basic foundation of relationship. I'm sure that you've all experienced the feeling of people who don't quite want to be in your class or don't quite fit to your offer. Yes? Maybe you can show me on the reactions if you've ever been there. I would love to see that. So yeah, thank you, Ju. It's nice to see your beautiful picture. I'd love to see your face. So it's disruptive. I know even online, even when it's not in the real space, even online, it bites away at the experience that other people have in the class that you're offering, and it also can bite away at your sense of worth. It can bite away at your ability to offer something that's really valuable. It can. I mean, it's about our own vulnerability. Yeah. So be clear who is your audience and keep what you're offering simple. I'm going to tell you in a few minutes, because I want to leave some time for question. I'm going to tell you, I think the best teacher is the teacher who's willing to share their failures. So I have a whole long list of things I've learned during this period. I'm going to be very transparent with you and share with you so you can learn from my own failure what not to do. Okay, in a minute. Now, I just wanted to say that in a time of extreme uncertainty, it's not just you who's facing that uncertainty, but also your students are facing those same uncertainties. It's not the time to start offering something outside of your comfort zone. If you've never offered chanting mantra and you decide, you want to start offering that kind of class, I mean, that's an extreme example. It's not necessarily going to build you up. It's just not. And so offering things in your comfort zone, it's also not the time to start expecting to bring in large amounts of new students. It's the time to offer something connected. It's the time to offer something that feels safe for your students, that gives your students a sense of belonging. So knowing names, for example, is a lovely thing. And giving them a sense of purpose. What is available? What can they actually do? When I started teaching online, I was, my sequencing was different, let's just say, to honor myself at this moment. It was different than it is now. I was offering like optional playlists of music, and I realized like what people really need is to be more present with themselves right now, to be slower in the yoga practice, not throwing their body around the same way that our government is, if you're in the UK at least, is throwing around rules of, it's changing all the time. Everything in our life right now is being U-turned. If you put U-turns together, look what it does. It's like the Fibonacci sequence of a river. It's up and down and all around. And so, to cut through that, to offer something genuine and pure is to offer something with some level of consistency. So I wanted to say all of that. Let's see what else I have planned for you. So I wanted to say something else about adaptability. And that is that, right now, especially with rules changing in various places, I was just talking to Alex, and they're in Chile, where the restrictions are actually loosening up a little bit. You're going to have people like street dancing before you know it. And here in the UK, things are locking down again. So maintaining some level of adaptability is very important right now. And then the other thing is that, people are really distracted right now. I mean, I don't know how many times did I check my phone with, I have the New York Times and the Guardian, and they're both showing different numbers of the US election. And I'm like tag teaming them to see what the real thing is. And if I'm doing this, you can pretty much guarantee most of your students are in a pretty distracted place too. So, shorter classes instead of longer classes can be really nice, something that gives them a chance to come for, a period of time, maybe not that they are coming and you give them the freedom to, go check their email or have a baby on their hip, but instead, like, can you stay with me with your phone off for 20 minutes, just as an example, to give them a framework that's achievable for them, and that will build up the trust with you as a teacher, and also it will build up their confidence that yes, they can get by without, checking the email or without having the fear thoughts for that period of time. So, well, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that you can do, also with your own marketing of your classes, just because I mentioned the marketing context. And I think what's best is to share those in a format, because I promised, I told you I would share my own failures. So my own failures, by sharing those with you, hopefully will shine a light on some of the things you can do well. And some things that I haven't done, which maybe you can do much better than I was able to for whatever reason. So I just want to say it would be nice if I can ask for your permission to hold this space for me. It's not easy to share from a vulnerable place the horrible failures of a yoga teacher, and I have some students here as well. So I hope that I'm sharing this in goodwill and good faith with you. I think sometimes it's the best way to learn. Anyway, so one thing not to do is to change too much your schedule and your pricing. It's very important. I did it a lot when I first started my classes. I wanted to offer, sometimes I get a little bit imaginative and very excited about teaching. So I had, this whole like portfolio of this class is slow, and this is my embodied class, and this is, a class that's medium for people. And it all became very quickly apparent that what people wanted was a place they could come to show up and move and breathe and stretch, not just their body, from a yogic perspective, but to stretch their potential, to be challenged just a little bit within their realm, because that challenge is what keeps us as humans interested. If there's no challenge, they're gonna have their phone near their mat or tune out, so being present to your students is it's so important. But the main thing I wanted to say is to find a structure that is less. I would say if you find a structure where you have 5 classes and you want to offer all these different pricing, cut it by half or at least 30%. Start small, build yourself up. Then on the pricing front, I offered free classes for a period of time, and I offered free classes to anyone that couldn't pay. And I felt very good about doing that. I felt that was the right thing to do. But as time went on, after about 4 or 5 months, I started to feel tired, for lack of a better word. I started to feel also that people were not necessarily coming to the class with the same level of enthusiasm and respect that they started. So, people would show up like a little bit late for class, or maybe choose to sign off a few minutes early. And here I was like doing my best to hold this space virtually for people. And I actually went to them and said, look, it's been 5 months. It would be great if you could offer something like £1, a donation, £1. And I feel that because I did this after the fact, and I tried my best, I'm human, so I make mistakes. I tried my best to word it in a way that was kind, that they would be able to see my view. But as a matter of fact, those people, some of them stopped coming. And that I was personally a little bit hurt by that. So what I want to say actually is decide for yourself. Everything is changeable. But I would say, decide for yourself. If you look at 8 weeks from now, if you're starting to make an online offer, you think it's going to be a month, look at 8 weeks. Can I sustain this schedule with this pricing, feeling good, coming from a place of goodness? Can I sustain this for that period of time? And if you can't, look at what you can offer and do it, again, from your place of truth. Not from so-and-so's place of truth, not from, the star of YouTube or Joe Wicks or anyone else, but what is going to work for you? What's going to pay your rent if you have rent? Like this, you need to be honest with yourself. So let's see, I've covered a couple of my big mistakes. Then I would say, be cautious of looking too far ahead in the future. That at this moment of time, people are not going to care if you're offering something, 4 weeks from now. They're living more in the moment. So, like today, a lot of you signed on like at some point today, and it was so great. And I have to say, I was a little insecure that nobody would come to my talk today because it wasn't put out there earlier. But as a matter of fact, Alex, that was the right thing to do. To offer something in that moment means that people see it and maybe that's going to be interesting. So, don't think too far in the future. I would say also from a place of fear, don't think too far in the future. Like things will change over time. And money, if you're worried about money, it's the worst type of fear to have. We can all learn a lesson from this time to make do with less. We can all do that. I would say as soon as you start to fear the income and the greed, or I say greed because it's mainly survival greed, but that's the moment to offer something for free. And you can. I mean, that's the beauty of this, is that you don't have to answer to everyone, that you can decide 1 week to offer classes for free, or to offer someone bring someone new for free. That's always a nice thing to do. And it doesn't have to be so premeditated, but maybe you haven't been in touch with your students for a week and you think, you know what, today bring a friend for free. Or this week I'm going to offer, I mean, that's something I did a couple weeks ago, is to offer classes for the week for free. And there's always something, if you're coming from the right intention, something good will come, something. And no, you have to have some faith. I mean, there's a stretch of faith because no one ever knows if something is really going to work. It's just, we don't know. That's the uncertainty of it. But if you feel good about what you're doing, then yes, that's a great thing to do. I mean, I wanted to go back and say, what does it mean to be aware of your community? It could be that what your community really needs is a chance to have a voice. So you can always ask your students what they would benefit from. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to offer it. One example of this is I had several students who wanted to have a really early morning class in like 7 o'clock. And I tried it for a month, and it was, for me, I mean, people came, it's a good time of day. If any of you want to start a morning class, bravo, you'll have people in it for sure. But for me, it was like, I have an autistic son who couldn't cope. I have my own sleep pattern. It was a disaster. I showed up for 4 weeks and I thought, you know what? It's not worth it. So you might have something like that too. Again, be true to yourself. And so I thought that I have a lot of notes, but as per normal, I think it's maybe better to see where you all are and to maybe allow you to ask some questions. Maybe I have the answer, or maybe some other wise teacher in the audience has an answer if I don't. Yeah, I think I made the point. Being honest with yourself is so very important. I didn't touch on social media, but I wanted to say something about that because that's such a big part these days of, there's Instagram live classes, there's Facebook live classes. My personal take on all of that is there's a huge saturation. There's a huge saturated market. It's almost overwhelming to even go on to Facebook or Instagram, especially if you're, a yoga teacher with a bunch of yoga teacher friends. It's like slightly offensive. This is my personal opinion about it. I find it like a bit repulsive that people are constantly pushing that stuff out. And you have to do what's right for you. If you feel comfortable pushing your message like that, I would say, then if you do want to push your message like that, then be varied. There's something called contextual advertising, which means that simply by offering something different of yourself, people will be more inclined to maybe take what you really want, which is to get them to your class. So if you have like a special recipe, if you have a special ritual that you do at night to get to sleep, those kinds of things are really valuable and will bring you maybe more than what, another picture of yourself doing yoga, whatever that means, not to share too much of my own personal judgment about that. But make it real. Like, this whole true to yourself thing is really actually the name of the game. Is everything you do in your life should feel right. And the more, hopefully, we all have some movement practice. Some of you I know are maybe Pilates teachers, but if you're a yoga teacher, come on, like, it's a part, not to steal Joe Biden's famous line, but, have an honest look at how you're putting yourself out there to the world. It should be the same as how you're putting yourself in there, in your body. I guess that's the point of yoga, is to mirror what's happening on the inside with what's happening on the outside. And because this is such a peculiar profession to be in, to teach that to people, more and more, the teachers I ultimately respect the most aren't even on social media. And, you have to find them by, a certain scent, or by finding letter codes around the block, so it's like this. But, we're not all there yet. And so, myself included, if you're not there yet, what's the next best thing? To have some kind of presence that shows who you are, maybe celebrates the things that you really value in your life. For me, it's nature and birds. But, also once in a while, to remind people that you're there teaching, or you have a special event. It's, there's no harm in that. There is a harm in oversaturation, I think, unless your goal is to get, a million Instagram followers or a million Facebook followers. Then there's a tried and true formula for that. More skin is better. Having more photoshopped images is better. I think the Kardashian sisters could be a good model if that's your goal. If your goal is to have followers, then you have very good role models. But, that's maybe not the path of the yogi. Now, some people are laughing. I'm glad. So, any questions you have? I see a chat. Let's see. On the dreaded subject of money. Can I read this, Leslie? Do you mind? Yes? Okay. So on the dreaded subject of money, I teach 2 classes a week at the moment, one face-to-face and one on Zoom that's not advertised. The first will always be free of charge. That's the one face-to-face, I'm thinking. But the second I have said is free until the end of the year. Do you have experience with asking for donations rather than a set fee? I have experience of both as a student, but not a teacher. That's a great question. And the good news is that Ubindi offers donation-based classes. So for myself, because I'm a rolfer and a coach, and I've had a business life before this, I have been working with Acuity. But Acuity doesn't offer donation-based classes, and I struggled with this for a while. Now on Acuity, since I have had a deep dive with myself since the failure of deciding I didn't want people to come without a donation. This has been a big struggle internally, and for me, I decided what was more important is for people to show up than to have this this tension of payment. So I've made my classes now optional payment, but also I'm offering donation-based payment on Ubindi. So I think for this, I would say I'm questioning a couple of things. One is I'm questioning why your face-to-face classes are free, when it sounds like you might have overhead of the space that would warrant you asking something for that. I personally feel donation payments are really a great way to go. And if you're offering something of value, people will pay more. They'll pay for it. One of my senior teachers is offering donation payments, and she too started with, oh, if you can afford, if you can offer, if you can pay anything, please do. If not, don't worry. She started with $5. She's in the US. Over time, also the bug caught her, and she said, well, actually, I want to ask for $10. So people, even very senior teachers, are changing, over time. It needs to feel right for you. There's yoga with Elisa. I've offered both since March. It's worked really well. Some pay much more than others. That's a good example. It's optional to pay or not pay, and it's worked well. I think it's always, if you're teaching people to have integrity throughout their yoga practice, to be true to themselves, but also to honor that you are also human as a teacher, most of the time people will do what's right and what's possible for them. And especially if you're offering a safe place where people feel that they are have a sense of belonging with a group, but also you're giving them the space to come back into their body. I mean, that's invaluable right now. Really, people will value that.
Can I just jump in and say, so I'm Alex, involved with Ubindi and Yoga Trail, and we have a lot of insight into what's happening in sort of the yoga market and with yoga teachers. And in our experience, people are shy about asking for money, particularly in the space of yoga. And with the new sort of teaching online and COVID things, a lot of people are selling themselves short. But the donation thing, on average, from what we can see, people actually earn more money if they just let people pay what they want to pay. They end up paying much more than you would probably feel comfortable asking for. It's kind of funny, and it's a good way to see what people are, what value they're ascribing to your class. So it's a way of letting people vote in a way.
No, I think that's really, really valuable, and that's also what I've experienced too. Is that people, when you give them a choice, most people will, if they want to come to your class, they will choose to do that. Yeah. And I also, I was just thinking like how to bring back the story that I started with this closing, which is that, when your life is threatened, you operate under a different set of principles. Being in the hospital, I saw like the best and worst of people. I saw the people in the hospital beds that were, desperate for attention of a nurse, who were actually like abusive to nurses. And I saw people who were just like, the kindness and the temporality of it all and the gratitude was amazing. And I think about that all the time because we are in a situation that is unknown. And when we look back, all of us will be at a place, I don't know when, but somewhere in the not too distant future, when we will look back at this time. And there will be, we're planting seeds all the time. It's the law of karma, that we're planting seeds all the time. And which ones are you planting, and how are you going to nourish those seeds to grow into something? So, at this moment, you're planting the seeds of relationship with your students, whether it's online or in person. And how we go about business is going to be maturing. In 6 months or 1 year's time, you can look back, you'll want to look back on this period and not remember the small self that you felt in that insecure crash place, but you'll want to look back and feel good about what you were able to do for people. That ultimately, at the end of the day, yoga is a service. We're offering a service. And, I had a teacher, my teacher always said, never rely on teaching yoga as your only source of income. If you do, it's going to end up with you having a dysfunction in the relationship. Now, I'm not sure if you are in that place. I know a lot of people have come to rely on yoga as the income. So if you're not making it work right now, let's say that your class sizes have dwindled to nothing. I see you, Yoga with Elisa. I see your hand is up, so we'll get to you in just a minute. Then, you have to ask yourself, as a yogi, not as a yoga teacher, as a yogi, what can I put out there in the world to serve. And that may not be in the form of a yoga asana class, but it may be that you take those teachings into some other job that is really necessary at the moment and apply those same principles. And without fear that that will inevitably, those seeds will blossom into something good. You have to have that level of faith. Now, Yoga with Elisa, can you unmute yourself?
Here I am. Hi.
Oh,
Hi, Lizzie.
you in the US?
No, I'm from Shepherd's Bush.
Oh, okay. No, I just
We know each other.
you look so familiar, and I'm
We've
just
seen
reading.
each other. You've covered for me, and vice versa. I've taught your mother when you were going through all your illness. That's what I was thinking. I remember we talked about it several times when your mum joined me in class, and it was amazing that it took up quite a bit of one of the classes, which everybody was happy because we were talking about you, and it was a very inspiring story. And your mum was in from the US to look after you, support you, and it was a great feeling that it's what's now so important about the online classes. It's not just the asana, it's not just going through the pranayama and just teaching a class now. It's very much about having an opportunity to do this, to exchange stories and encourage each other and to lift certain situations that are going on in our lives. I used to go to a church house group years ago. I miss it terribly, but it was a really lovely way of having this little connection of people that would lift you when there were times were tough and bake you a fish pie or something. So I think this yoga online thing has been able to mirror what we can do in life to a much greater degree than I originally thought. I think it's been a godsend, let's say.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Elisa. I mean, it's
No,
funny.
it's okay.
My mother, at the time before I had my transplant, she happened to be visiting, just as a normal visit, and I got the call like 4 days after she arrived, which was very lucky. So thank you very much for supporting.
I know, yeah, that's right. So it was all very kind of
quite a crazy time.
So yeah, we were lifting you up in the end of the class for a couple of weeks whilst it was all going on. Anyway, but
for a couple of weeks there. I think you mentioned you bring up something that's really important, actually, which is that now is the time to think about other ways that you can support your students. So asana is one thing, and we know there's a million free classes on YouTube or even within the online Zoom space, but your smaller community, those people, those core group of students that you know by name, that you maybe know their family or something of their life circumstance, to be able to hold a space for them to share where they are, whether you call it satsang or whether you just need to call it something that is much more accessible to people in these, especially in these darker days, that, it's so much healthier and rich to be able to get online for a half hour, 45 minutes, instead of, if you have a TV or to, be kind of mindlessly on your phone. People will really appreciate that. And there's many ways to do it, whether it's offering a book club or a recipe exchange, or to, have story sharing, that maybe you're just holding a space, but you invite other people to come and maybe tell their favorite story or something. I mean, these are all really important ways of creating community and giving people a voice. Okay, well, I think that sums up what I wanted to say for the most part. So if there are no other questions, we'll see. Then I am really appreciative of all of you coming and joining this talk. And
Thank you so much. I thought it was fantastic. I was quite blown away, actually, and like your authenticity and sincerity, and what you taught us today. I've really appreciated it, and really appreciate you talking to us all today.
Not even from the perspective of being a yoga teacher.
No, but it's just like great stuff.
Great. Okay, well, good. Hopefully, thank you for sharing that wonderful feedback with me. I really appreciate that. And I hope that some of you can take something away and take time, you know, take the space to consider what will work for you in your life right now. And I'm sure if you come at your classes and your students from that perspective, you can't go wrong. Can't go wrong.
Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you so much. I think it's really important what you said about looking for ways to serve. We need to remember who we are in the face of all the Instagram.
Yes, and keep each other safe as well. I mean, you know, sometimes I check into these groups with teachers who are so caught up with the space between mats and the rules and everything else. And I think the ultimate thing is, you know, are you keeping yourself safe? Are you keeping your students safe? Are you creating a space that is going to bring them back into their true nature? Or are you, you know, I think that that's always the message is, especially online. I've joined a couple classes and I realize how different it is to join a class online than in person, and how much more time we need to get into our own breathing, our own body. So, you know, there's a wonderful opportunity of exploring a different way to teach, and to also empower your students to be self-responsible at this time, and to, instead of giving strict, you know, strict guidance, but like, can you find a way of giving them a more semi-fixed framework that they can actually play and explore a little bit and make the practice more their own? So that seems to work well. All right, very good. Nice to see you, Leslie. Enjoy the rest of the sunlight that's coming in your window there. I think it's still light there. Yes. Victoria Jackson has come back onto the scene. Okay, well, I guess there's only one thing else to say, and that is that my classes are available on Ubindi. And if you are a yoga teacher, I really recommend you having a look at Ubindi to set yourself up. And, you know, it doesn't have to be like all at once. And by the way, Alex hasn't asked me to do this, but it is a really nice, friendly platform. And so, you know, why not? You can start by having a look at my classes that are posted there, and then maybe try doing some of your own.
Thank you for the kind words.
I should have mentioned, because the class was created on Ubindi, everybody signed up to Ubindi. We sort of tricked you. So Ubindi is free. You can play around with it. And if you have a small teaching business, if you have less than 50 students, it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
You know, play around with it if you want.
Yeah, and you are already, so as part of signing up for this class, you'll be able to very easily see Lizzie's other classes. So you can check her schedule, you can contact her through Ubindi as well. And we'll put this, the recording of this webinar on YouTube. We'll send you all a link in case you want to share it, watch it again. And we'll add the links as well there for all you all.
For all y'all.
I actually have one thing to say, which is I added today, I'm going to be doing, so I teach yoga, sutra, and philosophy classes, but I'm going to be doing less of the course thing and more once a month. So my next one is going to be at the end of November. It's listed on Ubindi's site, so have a scroll down. It's at 8:15 on a Thursday toward the end of November. I think it might be the 26th, sounds kind of right, but I'm not sure. And I have a couple master classes coming up for teachers once a month. So the next one is the 22nd of November, in case you're a teacher and you don't love to go to online classes and would rather practice on your own, but a master class might be a little different. So if you want to, check it out. Right, that's all.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah, if we close it, it'll kick everyone out. So
Yeah.
everyone,
thank you.
See you later.
Thank you, Lizzie, again.
Thank you so
We all
much.
enjoyed. Bye, everybody.